So I've arrived at the spot where I'm going to make camp. I'm going to set up a hot tent and stove and the rest of my gear. This is on the very spot where years ago I built a debris shelter. There's some of the debris left after we took it down. This is the first load of gear that I brought in. This is one of two 75-liter packs. This first 75-liter pack contains the hot tent itself, all my bedding, ground tarp, that sort of stuff. The white bag strapped on top, that's the poles that holds up the tent. This big thing here is the stove and all of the pipes and everything I need for the stove. All right, so this is going to be home for the next couple of days. And was there ever a lot of fresh bear scat on the way in? They're hungry right about now. I'm gonna have to be careful. So this little creek is going to be my water source for this trip. I'll be able to draw running water from here, filter it, and or boil it. Heading back for the second load, the other backpack that contains the rest of my gear. This is really black bear country. The bears are fattening up right now. So I'm gonna have to be particularly careful. And there's some fresh bear scat right now. Decent size. I'm gonna have to be particularly careful about hanging my food. It's always a bit of a concern at this time of year with a hot tent because you usually cook on your stove inside the tent, and of course that fills your tent with food odors. Here's an even more fresh pile. So I'm going to have to try to avoid cooking inside the tent as much as possible. Maybe entirely. It's not supposed to be that cold out, so I'll be able to have cooking fires outside. It's mild enough actually that strictly speaking I don't even need a hot tent. I just wanted to break out the hot tent to check it all out, make sure everything is in order, get my stove in working order. It's a kind of a shakedown trip. Make sure that I'm ready for winter camping with the hot tent later. Heading back with pack number 2. This is the pack that contains everything else I need. Clothes and food and cook kit and all the rest of that stuff. That's the one thing about hot tenting at this time of year. The hot tent is wonderful on those cold nights and those crisp mornings, or even those cold afternoons. But it's a lot of gear to haul in, especially when you're by yourself. So I have to do 2 trips back and forth to the car. I can't carry everything in one load. The stove is too bulky, although it's not heavy. But the tent, it's about 20 pounds and quite bulky. I can't fit both of those into or attached to a pack along with everything else that I need at this time of year. So it's always 2 trips, which is a drag. So it means you can't hike too far. And one thing is, if you're going to do this in 2 trips, always bring the pack first that doesn't have any food in it. You can drop that off at your site, wherever you're going to camp, and then go back to your car and get the pack that has the food in it. If you leave your pack that has the food in, you drop that one off first, and you leave it unattended for too long. Some hungry bear or porcupine or raccoon or some other rodent will get into it. So that's why I carried the gear out the way I did. Wow, there's a lot of bear scat around here. Whew. I'm really going to have to be careful about cooking and keep the food odors out of the tent. Otherwise, I'm apt to have a visitor in the night or the day. The autumn foliage is just beautiful. The camera never does it justice. Or maybe I just need a better camera. But it's just gorgeous. Love it. And no biting bugs because it's early October. Whew, I'm winded. This has been nothing but hills this whole way. Up and down, up and down. That is a lot of gear for one person. Invariably, when I set up camp, first thing I do is string a tarp in case it starts to rain, and I can take all my gear and toss it under there if it starts to rain, so everything will be dry. The hot tent is going to be set up over there. So first things first, tarp goes up. Tarp goes up first, comes down last, every trip. Thought I'd give you a tour of the hot tent setup. There's no snow to hold the skirt down, so everything has to be staked down with guy lines. The stove pipe that goes from the stove out here has to be secured. You can't have this wobbly, so I use a tripod lashed together with a wire here and then lashed around the pipe itself, so this is really nice and secure, so a big gust of wind will not dislodge this. In winter, I use very often a bipod. I just use two crossed pieces of wood at an angle, anchored deep in the snow and leaning up against it and wired together, and that's enough. But in summer, it's hard to anchor a bipod in the dirt. Dirt's not very deep here. There's a lot of bedrock underneath, so I use a tripod. It's more stable. I had to cut some stakes for my guy lines all the way around. Inside here, I've got a space blanket. That's where my bed will go. I'll put my mattress and sleeping bag there. I have my chair set up here. Nice and tall in here. Nice headroom. One pack there, other packing gear there. The stove is here. And I just need to level that a little bit. I'd like to have it a little higher in the back than in the front. My cook kit's all there. And I'm about ready to brew some coffee. And what else? Oh, yes, the tarp setup that I mentioned earlier. In the event of a rain, the hot tent is a very, very tight woven canvas, and it is treated with a waterproof coating and a fire retardant, but it's not absolutely waterproof without a tarp over it. And I don't own a special canvas tarp to go over it, and it's big and heavy and bulky. In the event of a downpour and water was getting in, I would relocate over here where I have a sil nylon tarp strung nice and high. It's all well guyed out, and I have it angled in such a way that it will shed water into the low-lying areas, and the center of the tarp is over an area that is a local high spot. So I could bed down here quite comfortably, and I've assembled some rocks here so that I can cook out here. In fact, I will probably be cooking most of my meals out here, not in the hot tent, as I mentioned. All right, coffee time. Hey, little guy. Hey there. I'm just enjoying a nice hot cup of tea, pine needle tea, in fact. And I wanted to deliver a little a PSA, a little public service announcement, because I had an unusual little encounter out here this morning that I thought I would share with people that might be of some value to them. So this morning I woke up in my hot tent over there, crawled out of my sleeping bag, got dressed, was about to light my stove so I could brew up some water to have a morning cup of coffee, when I started hearing some noise. I heard movement. I could hear footfalls, very, very loud, getting very, very close. At first I thought it was a moose, maybe a deer, maybe even a bear, getting closer and closer, and it was very clear that it was coming directly for the tent. And it was only in the last, second or two that I realized, oh no, these are human footfalls. These are human footsteps. And I kept expecting, if this was a person, that they would announce themselves as they approached, and the person did not. And the first sign that I saw that it was in fact a person was when I looked out my tent door, which was partially open. I saw the barrel of a gun moving by, and then the hand and then the foot of the person holding the gun, and I called out, "Hey!" And the person was startled, which was not a great situation. And he apologized and he said, "Oh, I didn't know there was anybody here." And we had a short exchange, very, very polite. He was just out grouse hunting here on Crown land. He's allowed to do that. I had no objection to that. I wished him well on his hunt. We had a little conversation. He was a very nice fellow. We exchanged names and so forth. Perfectly polite. But it struck me what a sort of violation of an old traditional protocol that was. When you are in the backcountry and you happen upon someone's campsite, you don't just walk to it or walk through it unannounced. If you need to approach the person's camp for any reason, you have to announce yourself. It's just common sense, it's common courtesy, but it's also safety, especially if you are carrying a firearm, or maybe the other person is carrying a firearm and is nervous out there. So for everyone's safety and peace of mind, the traditional call when you see a camp and you're approaching is, "Hello, the camp." You just yell out when you see someone's tent or tarp and you need to approach. You just call out, "Hello, the camp," because the person might be away from camp. They might be off fishing. They might be off hunting. But they might just be around the corner, out of sight, having a poop in the woods or something like that. Or they might be asleep in the tent. Or in my case, just very quietly preparing breakfast and a cup of coffee. And I didn't know what was coming. And the first sign that I saw that there was actually a person at the door of my tent, literally 1 foot away from my tent, was the barrel of a gun. And that is not the best way to start your morning. It's not the best way to be introduced to a stranger in the backcountry. So that's the PSA. If you are approaching a site in the backcountry, announce yourself as you approach. Give the person some warning that somebody is coming. And the way to do that traditionally is to yell out, "Hello, the camp." All right, that's it. Have a great day and enjoy some fall camping. Cheers. Off we go.